Alright all, and welcome back to a new video, and the first video in a long time here on Blair White's blog. It's been a long time between drinks since that Galway and Goodwood festival during the middle of the summer. I decided to take the rest of the flat season off and not produce content. I'm coming back for the national hunt season now, and I'm really looking forward to it. Starting off with today's video, which is my 20 horses to follow for the national hunt season of 2021 and 2022. It does seem to be going up in increments at the moment. It's 10 one year, it was 15 last year, but I couldn't keep myself to 15 this time round. I was a little bit greedy and have ended up going for 20. So in this video I'm going to quickly go through all of them as per the usual. It's also written out in a blog form down below, so if you want to read rather than listen, go ahead and click that down below and let me know what you think of both formats, and throughout this what you think of the 20 horses to follow. Like usual, there's a mix and match. There's horses in there that you'll well know, there's horses in there that you won't be surprised that are in there, but then again, hopefully I've tried to find you one or two that are a little bit off the beaten track and hopefully will be money spinners for their respective connections. Not all of these, potentially not even any of these, will be winning races at Cheltenham. That's not the idea behind this sort of a video. It's to try and find horses that I believe are going to win plenty of races for you guys to follow throughout the season and for me to follow throughout the season. So let's get into it, starting off with our number one. Okay, so we start off with Bareback Jack, trained by Don McCain and owned by Tim Leslie, and this looks a really nice horse going forward this year. I think he's going to go novice chasing after a good novice hurdle campaign last year. Having been bought from the point-to-point fields in Ireland, he was 3 from 3 over hurdles when jumping really nicely as well, crescendoing I suppose in the win at Musselburgh, where he accounted for a few nice horses in Tommy's Oscar and Third Time Lucky, and that brought him on towards that Kelso top novices hurdle at the back end of February. He's slightly disappointed when finishing 4th that day. Now the winner, obviously My Drogo, is a super horse and potentially one that will take extremely high rank over fences this year for Dan Skelton, but I don't think Bareback Jack was quite at his best that day and perhaps is worth forgiving for that effort. I think going forward he should be able to win plenty of novice chases up north this year, and hopefully will be able to develop into a nice graded novice chaser. The next one on the list is Big King for Barry Connell, also owned by Barry Connell, and Barry has decided to train his own horses, having had them with Alan Fleming for a while, Keith Clark for a while, and Ted Walsh obviously has also trained a few for him, but he's got all of them under his own grip now, and he's got some nice horses in here, and there's a few really good ones, as I mentioned on the recent Let's Talk Racing video where I analysed his stable. The likes of Enniskerry, The Lady in Red, Hagrancha de Tai I think is a very well handicapped horse, alongside a couple that are actually running at Galway tomorrow when I'm recording this video. I'm recording this video Monday night. But the one I've landed on is Big King, who's rated 121 and should be able to win another handicap hurdle or potentially go over fences this year and win a few handicap chases. He obviously won very impressively at the start of last season before finishing second in a big handicap hurdle behind DYSART Diamond at Christmas time. DYSART Diamond has obviously won a big handicap hurdle this summer as well for Willie Mullins, so that looks pretty good form, and ever since then he was stepped up to 2 mile 4 when just getting swallowed late on, and was a little bit disappointing at the Ferryhouse Easter Festival, but he'd had a long hard year at that stage and probably was within his rights to have been won over the top. He's now off a rating of 121 as I alluded to, and he should be winning races of that mark. The next on the list is DYSART DYNAMO for Willie Mullins and owned by Eleanor Manning, and this could be one of the best novice hurdles going around, and I certainly think at this stage he's one of these horses that you just have to be following this year, and he's probably not one off the beaten track. He's one of the most obvious on this list, but I just wanted him on there, and even though usually my rules obviously 1 horse per stable, this was the Willie Mullins horse I'm most excited about. The way he's done it in his 2 bumpers, both at Clonmel and then at the Punchestown Festival, have been reckless. They've been really good. He's pulled like a train. He's still got heaps to come. And I think just with maturity, a hurdle in front of him, I think he'll be an even better horse. My idea is that he'll go out and trip. He might go to 2.5. I don't think he'll go to 3 miles because he was very keen as a bumper horse, and I don't think he's lacking speed either, but at the same stage he looks an all-out galloper, and he looks to be a big framed horse that might benefit for a step up and trip when seeing a hurdle. He certainly should be winning plenty of hurdle races this year and could be a very exciting horse, and one to keep the right side of even going forward towards the likes of a Ballymore novice hurdle at Cheltenham. Fourth horse on the list is Easy As That for Venetia Williams and the Brooks family, and this horse I think could be a really nice horse to go over fences with this year on deep ground. He's been a funny horse, and he's been a very raw horse for Connections, having won his 2 bumpers really impressively 2 seasons ago. I thought he'd make up into a top novice hurdler last year, and he couldn't jump hurdles for the life of him. He got beaten in a couple of maiden hurdles, really disappointingly. Now, he was beaten by a horse called Any News at Bangor, which obviously Any News is a very good horse for Neil Mulholland, so there wasn't any disgrace in that, but then he was disappointing at Chepstow. He ended up going into a first handicap hurdle of a measly mark of 116, and despite not jumping a twig, absolutely hacked up, beating, I believe it was Eamon on Nook, who was having one of his small spells over hurdles at that stage. He's been raised £14 for that effort, so if he is going to tackle another handicap hurdle, it will be off a mark of 130, but it wouldn't surprise me if this horse is sent straight over a fence. He might give a fence a little bit more respect than he gave hurdles. He just kicked hurdles out of the ground. He looks a big framed horse that will suit going over fences, and Easy As That surely will be winning races. The more and more he settles, the more and more he matures and jumps that little bit better, he could be a really, really nice horse for Connections. Fifth horse on this list is PHEBUS for Joseph O'Brien and the GRECH family. I just think this horse has a very good chance of winning a handicap chase this year, and I slightly went over the board with him last year. I backed him for the Brown Advisory Plate, and then I backed him at the Punchestown Festival, and he fell at the last in both races. Now, he would have collected each way at Punchestown at least when putting in a decent enough round of jumping and a decent enough performance behind the runaway winner Asterion Forlange until coming down at the last. But unfortunately, he did come to grief. He's off a mark of 140, and that being said, he has plenty to learn still. He's still a very young horse, and he had some good novice form, which included a win at Naas and also a second behind MYLN when pushing that rival quite close in a Punchestown Grade 3. As I say, over a mark of 140 in these middle distance handicap chases over around 2 mile 4 furlong, he should be very competitive, and I'd be disappointed if he wasn't being able to register one of them by the end of the season. Next horse on the list comes from the JONJO O'Neill stable, and it's GASTON PHEBUS, who's certainly a horse that not many people will have taken much care to, considering he was 2 from 2 over hurdles last year. I'm just hoping this horse is perfectly sound, because I think he could be a quality animal if he does come out this year, potentially in handicap hurdles before going over fences as well. And as you can see, there's probably a fair bit of a trend operating here between these sort of horses that could run in handicap hurdles at the start of the year before going over fences. This horse is 2 from 2 over hurdles, as I said before, having won at Carlisle and winning at Carlisle. First time out for JONJO O'Neill, having defied a massive drift, which was a talking point in itself, but then going on to defy a penalty next time out, which was really impressive. There's a horse called Doc Picked Me who was on my horses to follow list last year that he was closely involved in a point-to-point finish with when trained in Ireland. Also, that horse in between those 2 horses was Patroclus for Nicky Henderson that won a couple of races as well. I think that was good point-to-point form, and he certainly translated that to the track. If, hopefully, he gets on the track early enough this season, he should be able to win plenty of races. We haven't seen him since November last year. I'm hoping that was a maturity thing rather than an injury problem, and hopefully GASTON PHEBUS can get back into the winner's enclosure very soon. The Mouse Morris contingent would certainly always have a horse in my horses to follow, and it won't come as any surprise to many that the horse I'm picking from Mouse Morris's yard is Get My Drift. A really, really nice horse this that I followed throughout the entirety of last year. Finished 3rd in the Wexford Maiden Hurdle before finishing 3rd behind Sea Ducker and Galopin Des Champs at Gorham Park on heavy ground. He then won a maiden at Leopardstown over Christmas. He was disappointing when Upton Trip at Ferryhouse in a Grade 2, and then came a very close second in that competitive novice hurdle behind El Barra at the Punchestown Festival with the MC Muldoon back in 3rd, and MC Muldoon's a horse I like an awful lot, as people will know. I think Get My Drift is a lovely type of horse. I think with the way Mouse Morris's horses are, you'd like to think that this horse will see a fence sooner rather than later. That being said, Mouse, with some of his younger recruits recently, has given them that second year over hurdles. I think no matter which way Get My Drift goes, he's going to be very competitive at a good level and certainly one to keep the right side of. Number 8 on the list is Gordon Di from the Willie Burke yard, and this ties in with the DYSART Dynamo form, and I just felt this was a horse I couldn't let go, considering he won a bumper at Galway when he beat Shakespeare's Word, who I know has ended up being a little bit disappointing for Paddy Roach, but was a very consistent bumper horse for a long while there. And then he defied a big break and also being 50-1 in that Punchestown winners bumper when finishing second behind DYSART Dynamo. He was beaten 10 lengths that day, I do contest, but he still put in a very good performance and had some decent enough horses in behind him that day. So certainly encouraging signs from Gordon Di. He was a little bit disappointing on his hurdling debut just a few weeks ago when I thought he might go very close, but Paul Townend looked after him after his chance was done. He'd need to improve his jumping a little bit off that 5th place effort, but he should be up to winning a maiden hurdle and certainly a handicap at a certain level. Number 9 is the Paul Nolan representative on the horse to follow list, and again Paul Nolan, another man. I could have picked 25 of his stable, but instead I've gone for the really likeable Mercury Lane, who will be going over a fence this year on soft ground, so we won't see him until probably November, December time, where he can make hay in that heavy ground. The last time we saw him, he won a maiden hurdle at Limerick by 30 lengths. Now that being said, it was a poor enough maiden hurdle, but he did it very nicely that day. He's a wonderful type of horse. He's very straightforward. They absolutely love him at home as well. He does the job at home. He works very well. He goes from the front. He jumps super, and they're really looking forward to him going novice chasing this year, and I am too. He's a real nice type of horse, and hopefully will be winning plenty of races. Maybe this year's a novice chaser, he might go a little bit under the radar, but he's certainly one to look out for, potentially in the next 6 to 18 months, running in the likes of a Thyestes handicap chase. I believe that would be absolutely tailor-made for Mercury Lane, and hopefully we'll see him in a race such as that very soon. Next on the list is No Risk Day Flow from the Ollie Murphy stable, another horse I like an awful lot after a good novice hurdle campaign last year, which started with a 4th behind DYSART before winning races at Uttoxeter, and he also won under a penalty at Southwell later in the year when he beat Rockstar Ronnie. In between those runs he came a very close second to Fontaine Calange when giving that horse plenty of weight, and he's not a bad horse for Venetia Williams whatsoever at Leicester. He was perhaps a little bit over the top when running a little bit flat at Perth, but as did plenty of other stablemates from Murphy's yard that week, so maybe they were just all in need of a summer's break. This horse looks like the type to have improved for a summer on his back, and again another one of these ones that will slip into a potential handicap hurdle before beginner's chase or novice chase campaign. He's off a mark of 128, which he should be effective of, and if he goes into a novice handicap chase should take a fair bit of stopping. No Risk Day Flow, certainly one of the higher ones on my list for this horses to follow. Next on the list is Pay the Piper from the Anne Hamilton stable. Anne Hamilton's a trainer I really think everyone should be keeping the right side of. I think she's a super trainer with the animals she has, and you look at the likes of Nutswell, Bavington Bob, Tommy's Oscar, Hello Judge, they all could have been in this list, but I've gone for Pay the Piper. He's a horse I like a lot. He obviously took 6 times to get off the mark in Irish point to points, and therefore was collected for decent enough money from the Anne Hamilton and Ian Hamilton combination. It was a bit of a bargain purchase when you look at it right now, because he won 2 novice hurdles before winning a handicap hurdle on his handicap debut at Wetherby last year, before finishing a very close second in his last handicap hurdle at Newcastle off a mark of 137. He was a shoddy jumper over hurdles, and it was really nice to see him make his novice chase debut at Perth only a week or two ago in that big lucrative novices handicap chase off a mark of 140. He ran a super race, jumping super, and only just not getting the better of Manila Trump, who's obviously a Perth regular and a Perth good scorer. He's now 4 from 4 at that track. And Pay the Piper was also giving him plenty of weight. Over a mark of 140 he should be winning races, but I'm sure he'll be going back into just novice company, where he should be able to win plenty of races before potentially going back down the novice handicap route. But Pay the Piper, and most importantly Anne Hamilton, certainly one of the big trainers to follow this year, and a real nice horse on her hands with Pay the Piper. It would be remiss to go through a list like this without mentioning the powerhouse duo of Henry de Bromhead and ROBCOUR at the moment, but it's not one that potentially you'd have heard of or thought of too much, and it's PETIBONOME, who's got a rating of 132, and that's certainly a rating that this gelding should well be winning a maiden hurdle off. He's ran 3 times for Henry de Bromhead, finishing second on all 3 of those occasions, most notably when second behind You Raise Me Up at Naas in a Conditions novice last time out. You Race Me Up then went on to be the SP Fab for the County Early, finished in mid-division that day. So that's not bad form. Feel Good Island was back in third, who's not a bad horse either for Liz Doyle. So PETIBONOME should be up to winning a maiden hurdle, and then into handicaps, I suspect, off a mark of 132. But he's just been a little bit disappointing that he hasn't got his head in front just yet. But as a result, he comes into this season as a second season novice, and that's an angle I love to explore at times. I think it's a really good angle to potentially get a few wins on the board. So PETIBONOME certainly one to keep the right side of for the ever-imposing team of de Bromhead and ROBCOUR. Another second season novice, but this time over fences, is the Dermot McLaughlin trained Opposites Attract, who's currently off a mark of 134 over the larger obstacles, and they'd have been disappointed that this horse didn't get the job done and didn't get a win on the board over fences last year. He certainly ran a few very good races in beginners' chases behind the likes of Assemble and Latest Exhibition, but also a few disappointing runs in there as well at Fairyhouse, and also went odds on at Wexford over 3 Mile 1. They threw him into the Irish National on his last run last year, where he finished a respectable 10th. His jumping could do with a bit of improvement, but he's still quite a young horse, and I still think there could well be a big handicap in him. He should be going down a beginner's chase route, and potentially is one even that might lurk into a national hunt chase market, because those second season novices can often do well in that sort of a race. And if this horse progressed the way I think he might do, he might end up working his way up to that sort of a race, or potentially another tilt back at the Irish National. But Opposites Attract certainly should be getting his head in front over fences this year. It's taken to number 14 to finally get him in the list, but O'Toole makes it for Stuart Crawford and Simon Munir and Isaac Swade. A horse I just can't stop thinking about, I can't stop talking about. I really hope he's just as good as I think he might be. He won obviously a Punchestown bumper by 15 lengths under Jordan Gainford. He was unfancied that day, he absolutely hacked up. He was then unfancied again in the Grade 1 with the likes of Sir Gerhard, Kilcrut, all the big names in there, and he finished second, splitting those two rivals, Kilcrut in front of him, Sir Gerhard behind him in third. And I think people say they like to, throw stones at Punchestown Festival form, which I understand to a certain extent, but I didn't think that they knew, Stuart Crawford and Ben Crawford, they knew what sort of a horse they had on their hands. I thought he was given probably a let's just see how it goes sort of ride from Ben Crawford, and then it was a realisation with 2 or 3 furlongs to go that this horse is actually very good and he could go very close here. He ended up running on very stoutly into second. I think he should be going up in trip this year to that intermediate trip of around 2.4, 2.5. And O'Toole is certainly one that I'll have egg on my face if he doesn't do it this year, because I really, really like him. Next on the list is the Dan Skelton representative of Stepney Causeway, who's a really impressive horse for the Gredley family and was a tearaway juvenile last year, getting himself off to a mark of 138. There's certain similarities to the same trainer-owner combination, All Mankind, and it'll be interesting to see whether this horse goes novice chasing as a 4-year-old this year, where he obviously will get plenty of allowances for the majority of the season. He jumped super for a juvenile last year, and obviously beating Mrs. Hyde at Brian Elson's by 19 lengths at Ayr at the end of last year was an absolutely terrific performance. And even though he did get a bit of weight that day, you'd have to say that that was something you weren't really expecting. He scaled all the heights this year. He looks like a complete tearaway. So I don't know whether if they sent him over a fence, it might be a little bit similar to All Mankind. It could be heart and mouth stuff, but as a result, not dissimilar to that former mentioned stablemate. He'll be winning plenty of races, and Stepney Causeway will certainly get an awful lot of horses at a certain level in a really bad place in behind and in a lot of trouble. So he should be winning plenty of races from the front this year off a mark of 138. Now entering the final 5 and starting off with the big story for Noel Meade, who has been a little bit disappointing, and I suppose is one of these ones on this list that you certainly wouldn't have expected. He's ran 3 times. He finished 2nd on his debut in a bumper before finishing 5th in a bumper, and then 4th in a maiden hurdle, but well beaten on that occasion. I think this is a horse that certainly will be winning races this year. I think Noel Meade holds this horse in pretty high regard, and you only have to look back at that first bumper run where he came 2nd to Ever Present. A horse called Magic Tricks was back in 4th. Is a good horse for Gordon Elliott, and that just just looks good bumper form, and he's disappointed since then. He has to have a certain type of ground. He wants a little bit better ground, and they couldn't find that for him. And also he wants 2 miles. He ended up running in 2 mile 4 furlong maiden hurdle because Noel Mead couldn't get him into a maiden hurdle due to the balloting system at the time. So the big story certainly will be up to winning a race or two this year. I don't know how far up the ladder he can scale, but he should be able to pay his own way for connections, and I certainly think he's a horse that you should be keeping the right side of, and one that probably won't be talked about too many times. Might be a little bit of a heart overhead situation, as my dad is one of the 4 zillion people that owns a share in this horse. But the horse for Nicky Henderson that I'm going to be following this year is the Carpenter, who's also one of these graduates from the Stuart Crawford bumper field. He finished 2nd in a bumper at Navan behind a horse called Gatsby Grey of the Queelies, who's ended up being sold to my favourite trainer Oliver McKiernan, or one of my favourite trainers. Paul won't like me saying that, but that looked a pretty impressive performance. He's a big grey horse, and he's going to go novice hurdling this year for New Connections. He was bought for 100 grand at the sale, so they obviously saw an awful lot in him, and they hope that he will be able to scale up into being a very good novice hurdler this year. With him being trained by Nicky Henderson, he's the type of horse that probably will be softly brought along and probably won't be over-faced as a young horse, but as a result he might be able to, you know, put a few ones beside his name. And certainly the Carpenter is one of the Crawford bumper graduates that I'll be most looking forward to, and I know Nicky Henderson holds this horse in decent enough regard, and hopefully for my dad's sake and for all the other owners group's sake, the Carpenter can win a couple of races this year. Number 18 comes from Kim Bailey's yard, and it's the Edgar Wallace, and I think he could be a well handicapped horse this year off a mark of 132. He was a bit of a slow burner over hurdles last year, being beaten in a couple before undergoing wind surgery, and he came back at Uttoxeter after that wind operation to win quite nicely, beating a good Fergal O'Brien horse and a decent enough Dan Skelton horse in the process. You'd think that this horse potentially will go handicap hurdling this year off a mark of 132, and Kim Bailey's horses usually jump well, and David Bass obviously gives them kind of never say die rides, and hopefully this horse might be able to go very well. I was quite close to, you know, sticking by my guns and putting up the Kim Bailey horse, Bob Hope or no hope, but unfortunately with Bob Hope you'd have to see that horse finishing out his races before trusting him too much ever again, and at the moment the Edgar Wallace looks a more safer convenience and hopefully will be able to run very well. Just 2 to go, and now we come to Gordon Elliott, and a horse that I've backed for the Supreme Novices Hurdle is 3 Stripe Life, who's obviously one of these horses from last year's champion bumper that plenty will be talking about, and plenty will be maybe trying to make a case for him over hurdles this year. And I think he's a nice type of horse. He obviously won his debut bumper before finishing 4th in the champion bumper, but he did a lot wrong that day. He dislodged Jack Kennedy on the way down to the start. He was quite keen and he didn't quite get up the hill. I think he's still got plenty of improvement and plenty of kind of maturing and just general experience to garner under his belt, and once he gets that he should be able to win plenty of novice hurdles. He looks like a nice type of horse. I think Gordon Elliott's probably best novice hurdle prospect this year, considering those Cheveley Park horses are no longer in his care. So 3 Stripe Life for new owners for the yard, or relatively new owners for the Yard the Hoy family. He should go very well and hopefully win plenty of races. And the final horse on this horse to follow list comes from the Paul Nicholls yard, and it is 3 under through 5, who will be a very nice novice chaser this year, and certainly one that potentially might take in the RSA or the National Hunt Chase on the way. He seems to stay very well, he jumps very well, and he was a lucrative horse for myself and for plenty of others following him last year before finishing 6th in the Albert Bartlett. I thought that was a pretty good effort considering he would have been plenty inexperienced, and then he backed that up with a really impressive performance when winning by 9 lengths on his last start of the season at Perth, beating Castle Rushen, who's not a bad stick for the Nicky Richards yard, should I say. He's now off a mark of 141. I don't think that's particularly relevant, as I think he will go novice chasing. I can't see him going down a handicap or open hurdle route, personally speaking, so I think 3 under through 5 could well be a really exciting novice chase prospect this year, and hopefully one that will give the McNeil family plenty to have fun about. So that brings this horses to follow list to a conclusion. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please do give it a like and subscribe to the channel down below if you haven't already. There'll be plenty more National Hunt content coming to you this year in slightly different forms. Obviously looking forward to plenty of different races and hopefully finding a few winners in the process. Let me know what your horses to follow are down below. Obviously try to not make them too obvious, as I've tried to do. There's a few in there, the likes of the DYSART Dynamos and O'Tools that plenty will have thought of and plenty will be looking forward to. But then there's a few in there like the Big Story and Big King that potentially you haven't been thinking of and might be able to pay their way for connections this year. But until next time, hope you stay safe, stay well, land a few bets in the interim. I'll see you guys very soon.